excited to be joined here by Steve Argue, and Steve is going to be talking to us on the topic of internships. Now, Steve, why don't you just begin by sharing with us a little bit about you, and then also why this topic's important for you.
Yeah, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Mars Hill Bible Church. I am Life Development Director there, so I get to oversee kids through emerging adults, really sort of thinking about the formational arc of students and how that affects them and how it works with our church body. So it's kind of what we do, yeah.
And when it comes to internships, one of the things I was just mentioning to you is, as youth workers, if we don't have an established internship program, we could get really excited about the idea of having an intern come and help.
Yeah.
But once they arrive, we sometimes ask the question, okay, now what?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We start in the wrong place, really. We're like, let's get the intern. What we really need is step back and sort of think about a conceptual framework of what it means to bring in an intern in so that we can really have sort of that maximizing happening. And so a lot of times what we talked about in the seminar that I did today was, one of the things is we have to really consider what are we inviting the intern into? What is the environment that we're inviting this intern into? Some environments are really great. There's stability, there's priority. They see in many ways the intern being a part of their team. And others, it's like this foreign object that is sort of entered into the staffing environment. And those dynamics have a dramatic effect on how an intern functions, how they're received, how they're encouraged along the way. And so there's a cultural element that needs to happen to really embrace the intern that's coming. And so it's an easy relationship. If you invite me in and I'm your intern, we have that relationship. Yeah. But now you have to share it with the whole staff. And there's a staff dynamic that's really, really important. So we want to invite them into that. And then secondly, we want to invite them into and ask the question, what's the type of role that we're inviting them into? Yes. And there's really sort of two elements to that. One is just the job description. A lot of youth workers that I talk to don't have a job description for their intern. It's like, just come follow me.
Sounds simple, but often overlooked.
And it doesn't necessarily work that way. The other piece, which is we really got some energy on and talked about today, was there's a developmental piece as well. There's a difference between an 18-year-old intern and a 22-year-old intern.
Interesting.
The way we bring them in, the questions we ask, the expectations that we have on them, they're making meaning in a different sort of way. And so if we're really going to be faithful to the intern, we got to really think about where they're at developmentally and sort of shape that as well. Yeah. Then the other thing we got to do is we just got to ask, what's the type of relationship that we're inviting them into? And really, we talked about three things today, and it was interesting to talk about it, is that we wear different hats. In many ways, we're a mentor. We're kind of saying, I see something in you. Come and join me in what I'm doing. Let's figure this thing out together, and let's kind of journey this ministry thing together. But there's another piece, and it's more of the educator piece, where we're saying, hey, we have learning outcomes. There's formational elements that we're trying to nurture in you and disciplines that we're trying to do. We don't want you just to do things. We actually want you to reflect on it and think about it. Yeah. And then there's the other element of, in many ways, of just being an employer. Yeah. That in many ways, you're their boss. And sometimes you have to have those heart-to-heart conversations of saying, you're not doing this right. Let's talk about that. I love what you're doing here. Do you want to do more of that? And so we have to sort of those gut level talks as the boss as well. So what we have to do as mentors is kind of wear these different hats with the intern to sort of maximize that for them. So.
Yeah, because I think I've been in situations before where I've had an intern come on for the very first time, decided that they're there, get them plugged in because they're going to help me do things. They're going to be almost like an assistant.
Yeah.
And then it's turned into hand-holding, and it's like, oh man, I don't know if I have what it takes to lead someone.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're not equipped to even be a mentor? What if that's not part of your personality?
Yeah, so there's two things to think about. One is I think everyone has the ability to mentor. There's something that they can share.
That's great.
The challenge is to think about it structurally. And I think when we actually think that if we get an intern that our life is going to be easier, we have to get away from that and recognize the fact that they're actually going to be more work.
Sure,
because an intern isn't the person that just does the things that you don't do. The intern isn't the person that we dump things on.
Yeah.
The intern is really part of our missional calling as a church to develop leaders. And so if we take that seriously, we need to recognize that there's certainly something that they're going to contribute, but at a much deeper level, we're giving our time and ourselves to actually sort of evoke this really important relationship.
So you mentioned something that's kind of like this age-old wisdom, don't dump things, but delegate things. How would you describe the difference between the two?
Yeah, even delegating can feel like dumping because there's not a relational component to it. It's sort of a shared sort of engagement. And one of the things that we talked about today, again, was this idea that whatever an intern does, the mentor is ultimately responsible.
Yeah.
If they screw up, it's my responsibility. If they succeed, we cheer for them.
Yeah.
That is where it's held. And so this idea of delegation is sometimes still feels like dumping, but I think you're making a good point in many ways, it's us being an extension, them being an extension of us, and us sort of helping them in that process along the way. So it's much more relational. It's much more organic in that sense.
So this is huge. Just trying to changing the perspective by why you even get an intern to begin with, and then what you do with the internship once they're in place. What have you seen examples or stories, or can you give us ideas of ways that someone's used an intern in a really clever way where it's been really mutually beneficial, where the intern is learning and growing and developing, which is probably why they want the internship, but the church is also able to gain from their ministry too? What are some innovative ways that you've seen internships?
Yeah, some of the things that we're doing in our internship, especially with our second years, is we're really encouraging them to really think about research. And so they're coming up with research questions and actually doing research, doing literature reviews, coming up with a 10-minute presentation, and then presenting that back to our staff, saying, I see this gap. Here's some things to think about. What do you think about that? It teaches them to present their ideas and articulate. It gives us the opportunity to actually hear some ideas as these interns are really sort of in the thick of things. Another way is even this weekend, I was working on a statement that I wanted to give at the theological forum that I did this morning, and I bounced it off some of our interns saying, what do you think of this? Give me some feedback on it. And so they were sort of a part of me coming here today. It wasn't about me. It was really about sort of this collective of us doing that. And I think there's something very meaningful about that. Interns are looking more than just for compensation. They're looking for meaning. They want their work to be meaningful. They want to know that they're part of something bigger than just their particular role. So I think those are some ways that there's some give and take, and it's very, very real. It's very, very true to what we want to teach them, but also model for them. So
a big part of what you're doing is equipping, it's mentoring. What are some resources that you've used or pointed to other interns or youth workers to say, these are key things that interns should be walking through if they're getting into youth ministry for the very first time?
Yeah, there is. The reality is as far as internships go, there's not a lot out there necessarily in the ministry world, or especially in the youth ministry world, that I've been really excited about. There's a couple things to keep in mind with resources, though. One is that there are some legal issues. There's a difference between an employee and an intern, and in your state, you need to know the difference, or you actually can get into legal problems.
Interesting.
So you want to keep that in mind. Secondly, I think there is some things from human resources that's really important as you're thinking about evaluating interns that would really be helpful. And in many ways, the way that we evaluate our own staff and the way we evaluate our interns is very congruent with that. And so there's some important pieces with that. And then I think there's probably some good resources out there just on formation, on spiritual formation. How do we hold that, and how do we assess that? And I can't really assess your spiritual formation, but I can call out and ask you to assess on your own spiritual formation. And so I think any resources that allow you to do that begins to capture this full-orbed understanding of what we hope internships to be.